I endured 27 years under the scrutiny of my mother's expectations, consistently assuming the role of the ideal daughter. Since I can remember, she has painstakingly manicured my life with a string of victories that determined my worth in her eyes. She had scripted every accomplishment and step. The Ivy League is a college league. Hobbies? Hobbies like ballet and piano are perfectly acceptable and not too unusual. Friends? Friends were an ideal social group for me. Every part of my life was dominated by the Blackwood name, and my mother, Eleanor, was its queen. I never questioned my circumstances until Daniel, who was unexpected, tough, and fiercely independent, entered my life. Daniel was a man who showed no regard for my family's status or my surname. He saw me in a way no one else did. Daniel was a psychologist, but not the frigid, clinical type I had imagined. No, he was friendly, intuitive, and, more importantly, attentive. For the first time, someone questioned my identity outside of my mother's carefully crafted image. We met 6 months ago at a charity event for the Westfield Children's Hospital. Everyone donned their nicest clothes and spoke in lovely, measured tones. I was bored as usual until he approached me near the fountain. He had warm eyes and a genuine smile, unlike any I'd seen from men in my town. We talked for hours after the event had ended. I told him stories I had never told anyone before, such as how I wanted to run an art gallery, how I loved obscure music, and how I got lost in Paris and had the best day of my life. He proposed on our weekend excursion to the mountains. It was simple and intimate, just the two of us, and it seemed natural. I proceeded without hesitation. I answered positively. However, the actual conflict had only recently begun. I could not ignore my mother's dissatisfaction with my decision. I knew it would be difficult to tell her, but I didn't expect it to completely destroy all I thought I knew about love and loyalty. "Mom," I stated with all my confidence, "I'm engaged to Daniel." The words felt like they belonged to someone else, not the life I had lived under her rule. She hardly looked up from her well-prepared lunch, her voice filled with hate. "A psychologist?" she questioned. "Therapists are just failed psychiatrists who couldn't get into medical school." She didn't even look at the ancient emerald ring I showed her, which was stunning to me. Her eyes, however, sent a forceful message. They were cold and calculated, the eyes of someone who would never allow Daniel inside her world. "Mom," I urged, "he's a good man. He's brilliant." She was unconcerned. She had no interest in his brilliance, charity, or empathy for me. All she cared about was his lack of pedigree and incapacity to participate in the carefully planned life she had for me. "You, Rebecca, are a Blackwood. We do not marry therapists. We marry for status, connections, and security," she added, her words cutting through me like glass. That was the moment I knew that nothing, not even love, would ever be enough to make her give up her power over me. I tried to defend Daniel and explain how much he meant to me, but it was pointless. Suddenly, the woman who I expected to love unconditionally and be my biggest influence in life was actively working against me. By the end of the session, I felt like a child, unable to believe that I could ever make my own decisions or break free from her grip. However, the following stage was already underway. Daniel and I had made plans. We would face the challenges together. I was not going to let her control my life any longer. But the actual test arrived the day before our engagement dinner, when everything changed. The night of our engagement dinner arrived, and my heart raced with excitement and terror. I'd spent the past few weeks preparing for the inevitable encounter. Daniel was willing to stick by me, but I wasn't sure how the night would go. My mother's presence hovered like a dark cloud, her control over every aspect of my existence, a force I could never really shake. I stood at the entryway to Harlow's, a sleek and modern restaurant nestled away in one of Boston's most prestigious districts. The restaurant boasted a guest list brimming with the city's elite, and I specifically selected this location for its visual appeal. I needed my mother to understand that I was serious, that my choice was not a passing fad, a whim. This was my entire existence. My father, Robert, had already arrived, appearing uneasy in his nicely fitted suit, his gaze frequently darting toward the door. My brother James and his wife Melissa arrived with their typical stiff smiles, pretending everything was okay despite the simmering hostility under the surface. I knew my mother would make her grand appearance at the appropriate time, and she did. She came an hour after everyone had gathered, which was fashionably late. She didn't simply go into the room, she ordered it. Her handmade Dior gown shimmered in the restaurant's gentle lighting, the diamonds at her throat and wrists catching the light with each stride she took. I could feel the room quieten as she strolled through the crowd, exchanging air kisses with the city's most significant families, the Roberts, Harringtons, and Winthrops. However, her glossy exterior did not fool me. I was familiar with her game. She wanted everyone to see her and recognize her strength. And yet, she continued to avoid me, as if I did not exist in her universe. "Stop staring at the door," James said softly, handing me a glass of champagne. "You know she'll show up when she wants to make her entrance." I attempted a grin while taking the drink from him, but my thoughts were elsewhere. I was ready to confront the lady who had dominated my every move for 28 years. In an instant, she possessed the power to destroy everything I had built with Daniel. And then it occurred. A subtle shift took place in the atmosphere, a flurry of whispers. She had finally come. She walked past me without a glance, her piercing eyes catching on a few familiar faces before settling on a corner of the room. Daniel and I exchanged glances, both aware of the impending storm. "She'll come around," he murmured calmly, but I could see the stress in his jaw. He was accustomed to handling challenging situations, but I doubted his ability to handle this one. I observed as my mother went around speaking to everyone except us, a masterclass in social manipulation. She avoided direct eye contact with me as she passed through the crowd. It was as if we were invisible, like a ghost in her neatly crafted life. I felt a flash of rage build within me, but I kept it in check. This was not the moment to exhibit weakness. I needed to stay strong, not only for myself, but also for Daniel, who was supporting me in unexpected ways. But then, at that precise moment, I saw it, the thing that would change everything. Daniel, the consummate professional, approached my mother. They were wedged between the bar and a couple from the Aldersons, and with nowhere else to go, he smiled and extended a champagne flute to her. My mother took the drink with her usual rehearsed grin, but something changed the moment Daniel drew in closer and spoke the words that would shatter our existence. "Nice to see you outside the clinic, patient 307. The words struck me deeply. The room froze, the glasses clinking in midair and the murmurs of conversation fading into a deafening silence. My heart ceased to beat. I did not know what to do. My mother's face was devoid of color as her champagne glass slid from her grasp and shattered on the marble floor. Her eyes darted frantically across the room as whispers erupted among the guests. I dashed toward them, my heart beating in my chest and barely able to keep my legs from crumbling beneath me. "What did you just say?" I choked out, my voice scarcely audible. Daniel's visage was austere, his professional mask firmly in place. He turned to face me, his countenance unreadable. Hoping to regain her composure, my mother lurched back, but the damage was already irreparable. Her secrets, her meticulously planned existence, had been exposed in front of all. The very individuals she had worked so hard to impress were suddenly gazing and judging, their phones secretly recording the scene. "She's your patient?" I whispered, disbelief sweeping over me. Daniel nodded, his eyes never leaving my mother, who remained transfixed and shaking. "She has been seeing me for almost a year. She's been using her sessions to control you and everyone around her." My mother opened her mouth to argue, but the words fell silent in her throat. She couldn't deny it. She could no longer conceal the harsh and brutal truth. I stood in the center of the room, feeling as if everything I knew and had achieved was disintegrating in front of me. Daniel revealed my mother's infidelity, shattering the illusion I had lived under my entire life. But when the guests left and whispered about what they saw, I felt something bigger was at play. This wasn't just about Daniel or my mother. The affair was about the games they'd both played with me, using me as a piece in their twisted power dynamic. As the night came to a close and the last of the guests left, I found myself standing in the rubble of my engagement, family, and life. Daniel, the man I had trusted, had completely upended my world, and now I didn't know who I could trust. The drive home was the longest trek I've ever taken. The silence in the car felt suffocating, like a weight I couldn't move. Daniel sat next to me, his expression unreadable. He had ruined my world, exposing my mother's secrets in front of everyone, and yet there was no apology or regret in his eyes, only the cold, detached professionalism that had defined his every deed since the beginning. "Why didn't you tell me?" Finally, I whispered, breaking the silence. "Why didn't you tell me you were my mother's therapist?" Daniel did not answer immediately. His hands grabbed the steering wheel hard, knuckles white, as if he was attempting to maintain some sense of control. After what felt like an eternity, he spoke with a voice that was firm yet strained. "I didn't think it mattered," he continued, his tone clinical and frigid as a slap. "Rebecca, I was attempting to protect you. I didn't want to jeopardize our relationship over an issue that I believed would only worsen the situation." "Protect me?" I repeated the words, which tasted harsh in my mouth. "Are you betraying me? Are you using me as a case study in your book?" He did not respond right away, and I did not want to hear any more of his explanations. I had no idea who this man was, who he had genuinely been. Daniel, the attractive, attentive man I had fallen for, was nothing more than an illusion, a professional facade that began to collapse as soon as I let him in. When we got to our flat, I did not even look at him. I grabbed my keys and walked out the door, without saying anything as he stood in the hallway watching me. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't stay in that apartment with all my memories of him and the questions in my head. His manipulation and my mother's control were both too much to tolerate. Later that night, I found myself at my brother James's place, in need of a safe environment, someone who wasn't trying to control me, and someone who wasn't playing a game. "Becca," James began, opening the door for me with a concerned expression in his eyes. "Come in. What happened?" I took a shaky breath and collapsed onto the couch as he sat next to me. "I don't know what's real anymore," I confessed, my voice quivering with emotion. Everything I thought I knew about myself, my family, and Daniel was a lie. I'm not sure who I can trust. James's silence was comforting, as if he knew that sometimes there are no words to ease this kind of pain. "I need to figure out what to do," I murmured quietly, wiping away tears that had begun to flow. "I want to know why Daniel did this." James gave a nod. "You should talk to somebody, a professional, not Daniel, but another person. Maybe there's someone who can help you disentangle everything." That is precisely what I did the following morning. I scheduled an appointment with Dr. Sarah Wilson, a therapist recommended by Melissa, James's wife. She was someone I could trust, and she had no ties to Daniel or my mother. The session was a frenzy of emotions, encompassing anger, despair, and perplexity. But Dr. Wilson really listened, and for the first time in days, I felt less alone. "I don't know what to do," I murmured with a shaking voice. "I feel as if everything is falling apart. I don't know who I am without their control." Dr. Wilson gave me a warm glance, her eyes filled with understanding. "Rebecca, you're not alone. You have been duped by both Daniel and your mother, but now it's time for you to take charge of your life. Setting limits is necessary to reclaim your control. It will not be simple, but you can accomplish it." Her remarks gave me something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't entrapped. That evening, I met with James again, and this time I wasn't just looking for comfort. I wanted answers. I needed to know everything: what Daniel had done, what my mother had planned, and what I needed to do next. "I've been doing some digging," James stated quietly, his expression serious. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner, but I've known about Mom's therapy for several months. This occurred immediately after the supper at the Harringtons. She became really inebriated and began raving about her useless therapist. She didn't say his name, but I recognized him as Daniel." I felt unwell. "You knew this information? Why didn't you tell me?" "I thought it was a good thing," he replied, his tone remorseful. "I assumed she was finally getting help, that she was attempting to change. But then I started to hear more. After you told us about Daniel, I began recording some of her thoughts about your connection. I had a feeling things might get messy." I stared at him, shock and dread sweeping over me as he played the audio tape. My mother's voice, slurred from alcohol, was unmistakable as she talked about ruining my relationship with Daniel and pushing me toward men she thought were more appropriate for the Blackwood name. "Listen to this," James added as he played another piece of footage. "She talks about using financial pressure to force you to end your relationship with Daniel. She's been planning it for a while." I felt a wave of nausea. My mother had actively conspired against me, using her power to control every part of my life, including my relationship with Daniel. She'd always been manipulative, but this was something new, far worse. I couldn't remain in the flat anymore. I needed space to think and determine my next steps. The next morning, I waited in Dr. Wilson's office, still reeling from the audio recordings James had played for me the night before. I couldn't get my mother's remarks out of my head. The way she casually mentioned using her riches and influence to influence my choices, steering me toward guys who matched her ideal rather than the man I loved. "Are you okay?" Dr. Wilson asked me gently, her voice calm but firm as she tried to meet my gaze. I shook my head, the weight of the reality still pressing on my chest. "No, I'm not okay. I've spent my entire life as a pawn in a game I had no concept of. I believed I could finally make my own decisions with Daniel, but now I'm unsure who to believe." "Rebecca, the most important thing right now is to free yourself from both your mother's control and Daniel's manipulation. You've experienced two distinct kinds of dominance, and you must discover your voice. It is critical to see oneself as free of their influence." Her words cut through the shroud of bewilderment that had accumulated in my mind. Find my own voice. I was accustomed to receiving instructions and adhering to someone else's plan. But for the first time, I realized I might be able to rewrite it. I left Dr. Wilson's office feeling clearer than I had in a long time. This was not going to be easy. I wasn't going to be able to escape everything in one day. But I had to try. I needed to gain control, even if it meant making the most painful decisions of my life. I couldn't go back to the flat. Not yet. I had to get rid of all my memories of Daniel and the life I wanted to create with him. I went back to James' apartment where he and Melissa were already waiting for me. "Are you okay?" James asked me, his face filled with concern. "I'm not sure," I said, "but I need to have a plan. I need to figure out what comes next for my future." James nodded, his expression serious. "We'll work this out together. You don't have to do it alone." And for the first time in a long time, I felt I didn't have to. Over the next 2 days, I reviewed all of the material James had provided, and I discovered an unpleasant revelation. Daniel's obsession with me, his exhaustive research on my family, and his willingness to seek a relationship with me while knowing who I was were not coincidence. It wasn't an accident. Everything had been in his plan. I contacted Sarah Peterson, a lawyer who specializes in medical ethics problems, to discuss my alternatives. She went over everything, including Daniel's violation of trust, manipulation of my family, and the fact that he had never disclosed his relationship with my mother before we met. "Rebecca, what you've described is a serious ethical violation," Sarah said after reviewing the facts. "Daniel purposefully crossed various professional boundaries. He has breached your confidence as well as your mother's privacy by conducting research on both of you. You have numerous options, including reporting him to the licensing board or filing a civil action for emotional distress." Her words rang through my mind. Taking civil action felt harsh, but I couldn't ignore what he had done to me and my mother. He didn't just exploit us, he utilized us as case studies for his book. The man I had trusted turned out to be someone who saw me as nothing more than data for his research. I left Sarah's office with my mind reeling. My entire life had been a lie, and now I had to decide how to proceed. Should I expose Daniel for what he's done? Should I go public with the truth, even if it means tearing apart the final remnants of the life I thought I had built? But before I could decide, I received a text from Daniel. "We should talk. I know you grabbed my files." My palms trembled as I focused on my phone. I had all of the evidence I needed. I knew what he had done. I had had enough of following his regulations. It was time to confront him, not to make amends, but to reclaim power permanently. I planned to meet him at a cafe, a public location where I would not be alone with him. When he sat across from me, he looked disheveled, unshaven, with red-rimmed eyes, as if he hadn't slept for days. His usual calm demeanor had crumbled, and for the first time, I saw him for who he really was, desperate. "Please listen," he begged. "I know I made mistakes, but I did so because I love you. I never meant to hurt you. You were not the subject of the research. It was about understanding these patterns and familial dynamics so that I could help you." I could feel the rage swelling within me, but I didn't let it out. I leaned forward and placed the folder of evidence on the table between us. "You think this case is about love?" I questioned, my voice firm and chilly. "Do you think your actions were okay because you loved me? You used me, Daniel. You used my mother. You crossed every professional limit, and now you're appealing for my forgiveness?" Daniel's face fell. He had no response or defense. For the first time, I realized I didn't require one. I didn't need him to justify his actions. I didn't need his lies anymore. "I'm not here to fix things with you," I said, standing up. "You've already shown me who you really are." I left him seated at the table as the weight of what I had found descended on me. This chapter of my life has concluded. Daniel was no longer part of it. But the difficult part had not ended. My mother was still there in my life, and I had no idea what to do about it. The days following my encounter with Daniel were hazy. I challenged him, exposing his lies, and then went away. But when I exited the cafe, I understood something else. I was free. Finally, I broke the bonds of manipulation and the never-ending quest to meet other people's expectations. For the first time in my life, I could make my own decisions. I could select my course. But I still had one person to confront, my mother. Even now, despite everything, she remains the most confusing aspect of my existence. I wasn't sure whether I'd ever fully be free of her, but I had to try. I needed to determine whether we could continue our relationship or if it was time to end it permanently. I met her at Dr. Thomas's office, a neutral space where we could finally chat without the walls of manipulation that had marked our previous conversations. I had no idea what was going to happen, but I knew it would be unlike any previous talk we'd had. She arrived on time, as always, immaculately dressed, the epitome of perfection. But this time, something was different about her. She seemed less strict and dominating. As we sat down, I saw a slight fracture in her demeanor, a vulnerability I had never seen before. "Rebecca," she murmured, her tone quieter than usual, "I understand things have been difficult between us, and I am aware that I have made mistakes." I felt a jolt in my chest. This was the first time she'd ever admitted her mistakes. I almost couldn't believe it. "You don't know what it's like," she said, her expression sad, "to live your entire life governed by expectations, by family name. I did it because I believed it was the correct approach. I believed I was protecting you." I shook my head, ancient rage building within me. "Are you protecting me? You have never protected me. You have influenced me. You have influenced every decision I make. I never got to be my person. I was simply an extension of the Blackwood name for you." She cringed at my remarks, but did not turn away. "Rebecca, I believed I was providing you the ideal life, the best opportunities, but now I realize I went about it all wrong. I pushed you away when I should have let you go." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Was she truly admitting she had made an error? Had she made a mistake? I was unsure what to say. This was not the woman I knew. This was not my mother, who had always demanded that I live for her. "Why didn't you tell me you were seeing Daniel?" I asked, the question still blazing in my mind. "You used him to influence me. Did you know what he was doing?" She paused, a look of remorse on her face. "I didn't believe it would matter. I assumed that if you were happy, it would be enough. But now I see. I realize how wrong I was. I pushed you away when I should have let you go." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Was she truly admitting she had made an error? Had she made a mistake? I was unsure what to say. This was not the woman I knew. This was not my mother, who had always demanded that I live for her. "Why didn't you tell me you were seeing Daniel?" I asked, the question still blazing in my mind. "You used him to influence me. Did you know what he was doing?" She paused, a look of remorse on her face. "I didn't believe it would matter. I assumed that if you were happy, it would be enough. But now I see. I realize how wrong I was. I never offered you the freedom to lead your life, make your own mistakes." I stared at her with a troubled heart. "You've been so controlling, Mom. And it's not all about me anymore. It's about you too. You have spent your entire life hiding behind the Blackwood name, power, and influence. But I would rather not live that way anymore. I would rather not be a part of your empire." Her eyes welled up with tears, and for the first time, I sensed regret. "I've always wanted what's best for you," she said softly, her voice breaking. "But I can see now that what's best for you isn't what I've been giving you." The silence that followed was thick, but not oppressive like in the past. The silence indicated that change was conceivable. Dr. Thomas, who had been sitting silently across from us, eventually piped up. "Eleanor, remember that transformation takes time. It is not easy, and it does not occur overnight. But it is a start, and that is what matters." I nodded, feeling utter tiredness in my bones. I'm not sure what will happen now. I'm not sure if I can ever totally trust you again. But I need you to respect my decisions. I want you to view me as a person, not merely an extension of your vision. Eleanor gazed at me, her expression softening. "I will try, Rebecca. I'm not sure whether I can change everything at once, but I will try. I will respect your choices." It was hardly a flawless answer, and I knew there would be more challenges ahead. But for the first time in my life, I felt like my mother saw me, not just her daughter, but as my person. That evening, I sat alone in my new Beacon Hill apartment, the walls a deep teal, a color I had picked for myself, but one that my mother would never have approved of. I didn't feel alone, however. I felt peaceful. The path had not been simple, but it had brought me to this point. I had been manipulated by those I loved the most, but now I had regained control. I was no longer living to fulfill someone else's vision. I lived for mine. The phone chimed with a message from James. "How are things going? Is everything okay?" I grinned and said, "I'm fine. I'm finally okay." And for the first time in years, I believed it.